How's it going, guys? So I figured that I would take a nice, close, in-depth look at one of my favorite games of all time, from one of my favorite franchises of all time, and that is Sonic the Hedgehog 2. This is widely regarded as one of the greatest games of all time, one of the greatest Sonic games of all time, or at least one of the best in this series. So I figured I'd take an in-depth look and share a lot of my childhood memories. So I figured I'd go through it one zone at a time and tell you my memories of it, and as well as some of the other gameplay elements and just a lot of weird, crazy and anecdotes, stories that I have to share throughout my childhood, because I've played through this game an insane amount of times. I think I know it like the back of my hand. I know it pretty well, and I have to say that this is, one of my favorite games to look back on and talk about. So here we go, guys. I hope you all enjoy this one. Now, when you start off this game, like so many Sega Genesis games, you're greeted with the Sega chant, and this is just where the nostalgia starts. Then it cues up that famous title screen, and this is something that not even the Super Mario Brothers franchise could get into the same groove as Sonic. When you start off a game, there's always some amazing intro. This even continued into the 3D games. Something about that ring around Sonic and the way how he just appears and it's like floating above the ocean here, it just looks so mesmerizing. Like, you definitely want to play start. You want to see what this adventure holds for you. Now let's talk about the first zone in this game, Emerald Hill Zone. So this is like Green Hill Zone, but with a different aesthetic, but a very similar one at that. I have so many great memories of trying to find all the alternate pathways, and also it's easiest to collect a lot of rings and stock up on extra lives. It's easy also to get the perfect bonus when you collect all the rings in the zone, and I don't think I've ever quite gotten that. It's very tricky to get to all the pathways and collect all the rings, but I would always find it particularly easy to collect a lot of rings than in the other zones, which are filled with tons more enemies and way more obstacles, where it makes it easier to lose your rings. Also, this waterfall Secret Life, there was something so satisfying as a kid through one of my numerous playthroughs. When I finally found it, it was like uncovering a treasure trove of like gold, like something hidden away from sight, and it is. And when you finally find out how to get up into this nook and cranny, it feels oh so satisfying. So many great memories come flooding back. Because this is the first level of the game. These two acts of Emerald Hill Zone really represent my childhood when it came to booting up this game in my Sega Genesis. You see this level probably more than any other level unless you play through the whole game. And it's such a great introduction to the game, showing you the speed, showing you the physics, and just how this game is going to end up playing. And when you have a lot of fun the first level, I don't think a lot of people realize just how important a first level is, and I think Sonic Team definitely knows and recognized it greatly in this game. Also, in the context of the historical nature of the Sonic series, you'll notice upon completion of Emerald Hill Zone Act 2 that this is the first Sonic game that features only 2 acts. Now, of course, there were only 2 Sonic games at this point, only one other to compare it to, but the first Sonic game had 3 acts. This game only has 2, so it's actually a shorter experience for each level, and you'll notice that they decided to make things a bit more compact this time around. But perhaps that was because they were going to feature more levels and probably needed a bit more room to work with, so they decided to drop the third act and just have more levels instead. And before we move on to talk about the next zone in the game, let's talk a little bit about the special stages. So Sonic is known for the 7 Chaos Emeralds, and when he collects them, he's able to transform into Super Sonic, and by collecting them you get the true ending to the game as well. So thing is, you're probably going to want to do this, you know, it's a goal in mind. I mean, who wouldn't want to collect the 7 Chaos Emeralds? The only thing is, the challenge is so much greater than the first game. And this is where I need to talk about this for a moment, and this is a great memory of mine of just how challenging these special stages are, and how I feel that they're almost impossible unless you play the game with 2 players, because it's nearly impossible with a computer controlled Tails, because this Tails, you can see, just he loses all the rings, and in order to win these stages you're supposed to collect a specified amount of rings, and then you'll continue on to the next part of the stage. If you do this several times, you'll end up getting the emerald at the end. But because of the poor AI attributed to Tails, this is not possible. Now, you could also play this game with just Sonic, or you could just play it just with Tails, but then you're also not going to have enough bodies on the screen to collect all the required rings. So it's kind of a catch-22, so unless you have a second player nearby, it's almost impossible. And this is really frustrating because I'd love to play as Super Sonic. But really the true ending is really just an end title card, really. You know, all it is just it's a different screen cap of Sonic. All it is just Sonic is Super Sonic. You don't even get to see anything else. There's no extra footage. There's no extra hidden cutscenes. So you have to really weigh it out, and plus you may not even be able to do this because I haven't. I'm sure it's possible, but to me it's just far too challenging to keep on trying and to keep on failing. I've even tried doing this with save states, and it is still impossible to me. I don't think I'm ever going to be able to collect them unless I happen to be playing this game with another person. Chemical Plant Zone. Talk about a design, and that music is probably my favorite track in the game, aside from the boss music. Those slopes, when you go down them at such high speed, and just, it's just so awesome looking, such, a metallic landscape, so industrial, that poisonous water, and of course the memory of this part of the game, when I couldn't figure out as a child to go left at this part. There was something like, when I got to this part, I didn't think you would go left, because throughout the game you were mostly going to the right, when you think about it. And this really shouldn't have thrown me off all that much, but I actually played Sonic 2 before I played the original Sonic game as a kid. Like, Sonic 2 was the first game that I got with the Sega Genesis. I can't quite remember if it was bundled in with the system or not, but I think that these platforms that you're supposed to jump on to the left, they weren't there like the first few times I played this game, so I found it very discouraging. Like, I didn't hate the game, but I still, was very put off, like, and disappointed because I couldn't figure out how to go any further. But that's kind of what happens when you are a kid. And I love every single time I play through Chemical Plant Zone, I have those memories as a kid. Like, I'm saying, like, this is pretty simple. It's pretty easy. The other part is over here. When I used to fall through here, I used to get so pissed off once I finally figured out that you could get past this part with the moving platforms. Sometimes I would fall through here by accident because I was going too fast. Now I'm extra careful when I do a playthrough, and that is really frustrating, because if you fall off over there, you just get sent to a bottomless pit, and it's instant death. And I always got a kick out of how one of the game developers actually put an extra life down here, kind of showing like if you fell down here by accident, it's okay to fall, and also it's okay to explore this otherwise uncharted area that is underwater, where normally you'd want to avoid, considering that the water is supposed to be poisonous. But I like that they actually went in that direction, decided to actually put some goodies down here. Also, I have to talk about how much that drowning countdown terrified me as a kid. I mean, I was like horrified. I mean, the fact that Sonic could drown, keep in mind this was my first Sonic game, and, hearing that countdown, it really got my heart pounding, something that I wasn't ready for as such a young kid. And I was really impressionable, as you could imagine, and knowing that like I had to get moving, I had to get out of the water, Sonic was going to die, seemed like a very tall order for me as a kid, which made this experience even more nerve-wracking, and I probably didn't even want to think about going to the left and waiting any more than I had to, because I just wanted to get the hell out of the water. But overall, this is one of my favorite levels in the game. The first level is so much fun, but you want to get through it so you can get to the second, which really adds to the excitement of progression in Sonic 2. And you really couldn't ask for a better follow-up to an already great first level. Aquatic Ruin Zone. Something is so perfect about this music in this level, and I love the aesthetic. It looks beautiful, just this jungle. You feel like you're kind of nearby a Mayan temple or something like that, to that effect. They really wanted to stress about staying on the top portion of this level. This is something that you could go back to Spring Yard Zone and Green Hill Zone. You always want to stay more towards the top of the level. It's usually the easier portion. If you fall down into the water in this level, you're really going to have a hard time. They really seem like they positioned the air bubbles a lot further apart than in Labyrinth Zone in the first game. You really have to struggle, you have to kind of get everything right, and you can't really dawdle too much or waste too much time in the water, or you're going to end up drowning. Also, I loved playing this level as a kid and seeing Grounder as a fan of Sonic, The Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog. That used to be on weekday mornings. Sometimes I would catch it before going to school. I think it was on other time slots as well. Everyone knows that zany, very Looney Tunes slapstick type of Sonic the Hedgehog cartoon, as opposed to the more serious one on Saturday mornings. It was Scratch and Grounder, the two foolish and simple-minded robots that would try to capture Sonic and Tails, or at least try to kill them. Grounder is here, and he's very much like the Burrowbot in Labyrinth Zone, but I always used to get a kick out of seeing Grounder. The only thing is, I always end up running into him. There's this part in the game where there's this spring, and if you use it and you don't go forward, you're gonna end up ramming right into him, losing all the rings that you collected. You're always guaranteed to get hit by some of these arrows that come out of these poles with Dr. Robotnik's face on them. You're gonna get hit in this level. I think this is probably one of the most difficult levels to maintain your ring count, because there's just so many different obstacles. Like, I feel like someone was with the dial of difficulty from Chemical Plant to Aquatic Ruin. They just turned that joint up to 11. It's crazy. It's insane. Just how many different things that you could possibly run into here. And plus, you've also got all the leaves and branches that are in the foreground that kind of block your view. Now, that's kind of the point of the level, and it adds to the difficulty. It's a really nice aesthetic, and I like this level a lot, even though it can be very frustrating to keep getting hit by stuff constantly. Casino Night Zone. This is a lot of people's favorite level. I'm not sure if it's my favorite, but I like it a lot. And it has this, probably one of the best aesthetics, I will say that. It's the perfect idea, Sonic getting flung around like a pinball. Now, this was an idea that kind of started with the Spring Yard Zone in the first Sonic game, but they didn't have the slot machines, and this is a really cool feature, like Sonic kind of going in. It's not really a slot machine because, with a slot machine there would be like a lever on it, but you kind of go inside and there's this slot machine, much akin to, say, Super Mario Brothers 2. At the end of a level, you would play the slot machine, be able to earn extra lives. Here you earn rings that could lead to extra lives. I remember as a kid playing around with the slot machine, and the time actually ran out. Like, I hit the 10-minute mark because I was having so much fun, and I wanted to try to rack up some extra lives. But you really got to be careful, because if you spend too much time doing that, time could just slip your mind and you could just end up losing a life, which kind of defeats the purpose of trying to gain some extra ones. Also, we got to talk about that music. It's the perfect casino. It's very swanky. You feel like you're kind of walking into a casino, with your best tuxedo on, something silly like that. But once again, they really captured the feel of the level that they ended up implementing, and it works oh so well. I have to also question these little things over here, these little slots off to the right side. I always felt like there's some way that you could like jump into these or get up like high onto the level and fall down on top of them. Usually you see these and they just kind of add to extra points, but as far as I know, there's no way that you could enter into these, but it was just very alluring. Like, I feel like it's something extra. I know there was a lot of cut content from Sonic 2, but, maybe these objects have something to do with that. I just always found it to be very mysterious, and it really adds to the lore of this game, and I like that. Even though it's inaccessible, kind of frustrating because it's like something that's there that you can't access, but it's very mystical, and I like that sort of thing. Hilltop Zone. I remember as a kid, the lava that rose up from the bottom of the screen really startled me as a kid. I never really liked parts in games where, the screen's moving and they're trying to like rush you. Not really so much an auto scroll, but when something's chasing you, it really makes your heart pound. You can't really take time to enjoy, and kind of do the level at your own pace. Now, of course, there's always a 10-minute time limit in Sonic levels, but this was something a little bit different. We saw, a lava wall just briefly chasing you in Marble Zone, which, I think I had the first Sonic game at this point when I had made it to this level as a kid, but there was something about this stage that kind of made me feel uneasy. It's also kind of how the music is a lot more gentler. It's gentle also in Emerald Hill, but this also kind of gives you a sense like, oh, things are going to be nice and calm and everything, but then the level just decides to say, oh, you know what, we need to have lava start chasing you. And I also found this odd because it's not a volcano, but maybe they didn't want to be so generic as to make it into a volcano. But that actually kind of would have made it cooler. I mean, that did leave room for a Lava Reef Zone in Sonic and Knuckles, I suppose. Another interesting thing to note is if you go into Sonic Retro, they kind of confirm this, that The landscape looks very similar to Emerald Hill Zone. It just has, you know, a blue aesthetic instead of that, like, I guess greenish, goldish type of look to it. I don't really know, I'm colorblind, but it looks very similar to Emerald Hill, just with different obstacles and a different geographical landscape. They also talk about how you could kind of see this in the background of Emerald Hill. I don't know, I never really noticed that. I kind of have to check that out on my next playthrough. I'm kind of looking at the footage here, and I guess, you know, that is the case, but you know, that's really interesting to kind of look back and see that there is a bit of geography lore in the Sonic 2 mythos. Mystic Cave Zone. This is probably the swankiest music track in the whole game. It really kind of gives off this very mysterious and you know, and spooky type of vibe. I just think of spikes when I think of this level. Lots and lots of spikes on the floor, spikes coming out of the walls. There's a lot of obstacles. There's a lot of things to get hit by, including these caterpillar badniks that just pop out of the platforms over here, and you could get crushed by these boxes if you're not careful. This is certainly not a level that you could race through. It's one of those levels where you kind of have to take a bit more time. Now, it's not as bad as Aquatic Ruin when it comes to getting hit every 2 seconds, but it definitely is one of those levels where you have to slow down and take a moment to see what's coming up. This is also the level that is home to that notorious pit that you fall into. Also, it's interesting to note that in the mobile port of this game, you use this to access the Hidden Palace Zone. Now, I really wish that they would release that version on consoles, that you know, so I could finally play the level and, you know, see the excellent widescreen presentation that is added. Now you see I'm playing this game you know, with the picture stretch, because I just like playing it this way more than having the black boxes. I know that's not really a preference for a lot of people that like to maintain the original aspect ratio, but I wish I could have that. But anyway, the spike pit has been notorious because if you fall into it, you just basically have to wait until you die. This was always a bigger issue for me in the 2-player mode because the pit is still present, even though they move things around in the 2-player mode. You know, you fall into here, and basically, I have a lot of memories of friends laughing and mocking me, and I would also mock them when they would fall into it. This is a interesting trap that definitely adds to the lore, you know, and the storytelling nature of this game. You know, looking back and say, oh, remember that time, you know, you found out that this was the insta-kill pit, you know, but it really isn't a very, we'll say, interesting design flaw to kind of add this thing in there when there's really not too much of this anywhere else in the game. Oil Ocean Zone. I love the Egyptian style music. It's also a pretty creepy level when you kind of think about it. These seahorses floating, also these spikes that move back and forth. There's always something that made me very uneasy about this as a child. But you know, this is also a pretty difficult level. There's a lot of obstacles. You know, you've got these platforms here that pop up that are being propelled up by the fire, and I remember a lot of times that I would like fall and then the lid would come back down and crush me. Not a really super difficult level, but there's a lot of stuff that you have to watch out for in it. Quite a few different obstacles. I also like these cannons that shoot you around to different spots. Also, there's definitely a lot of paths that I noticed when you're being shot around that you can access that if you backtrack, but I still, to this day, I don't think I've ever really 100% found everything that this level has to offer. You know, I suppose one of these days I'm going to have to try to explore it a little bit further. But really, these are pretty big zones that have a lot to offer and a lot to explore. There's just a lot of danger. And the other thing that I kind of like what this level does is you go onto these slides of oil, and kind of once you you go down these slides, there's no way of getting back, and you'll kind of notice as you're going down them, there's parts that you could jump off of, but if you're too late, you'll never be able to get back up the slides, try as you might. I remember as a kid trying to jump back up the slide, but it was impossible because I really wanted to access some of the goodies and some of the alternate paths that I saw as I was sliding down. So it's kind of like you really, it kind of reminds you, you have to really be paying attention. You're moving at a fast speed, you're playing a Sonic game, and you have to really take a look. You know, there's a lot of alternate paths, but if you're a little bit too slow, then you're going to be punished and you're not going to be able to access that part of the level again. Metropolis Zone. So I have 3 names for you: Shellcracker, Slicer, and Astron. Now, these 3 enemies will give you nightmares. They are going to haunt you during the entire 3-act length. Yes, that's right, I said 3 acts. Unlike any other zone in this game, Metropolis Zone has 3 grueling acts of some of the most difficult level design you will face in the entire game. These enemies are relentless. Astron explodes and in all 5 directions, and chances are you're going to magically be in its path of fire. You've got Shellcracker over here, which Claw just comes out at you the moment you enter the screen that he's on. And Slicer is always in the most inopportune of areas, just like Shellcracker, and he throws his arms at you, usually when you're just about to jump onto a platform. And one of the greatest things, greatest in parentheses of course, about these 3 zones is they love to introduce this little mechanic here where you run on the screws, which is actually pretty creative, you know, using Sonic's speed to run on top of this nut here up the screw, and you will see that as you're running, the Astrons will explode. You'll get to the top and, oh, look at this, in one spot there's spikes. Oh, didn't expect to see that there. And then you have the Slicer in another part, actually in quite a few parts, and just as you're getting to the top, whoops, there you go, you get hit. Isn't that just great? Isn't that wonderful? You're getting to the top not knowing what to expect. And I get it, it's trial and error, but these 3 acts, it's just such an upswing in difficulty from Oil Ocean Zone. You're not going to be expecting it. No one's going to be expecting it. And when you do get here, there's going to be a lot of expletives being uttered, and you know that, you know, you're going to get frustrated because there is just so many difficult parts, unpredictable sections of this zone that, you know, it's kind of hard sometimes to have a good time when you're just gritting your teeth in anger because of the enemy placement. And they know what they were doing. It is clever, it is difficult, and you are getting on, you know, in the game, and you're getting towards the end, but, you know, you don't expect this difficulty spike to go up in such a high fashion. I mean, man, oh man, there are many moments where it just feels like you're gonna keep getting hit constantly. You'll lose more rings than you ever had before. Yeah, so this zone will do a real number on you, to say the least. Sky Chase Zone. Now, this is really funny. I love how Metropolis Zone is 3 acts of just pure agony, and then you've got this delightful music track, and it's very calm. You're above the clouds as Tails is piloting you. Something interesting to note that this is the first appearance of the tornado, which is Tails' plane, and we would be seeing this for many years, decades to come in the Sonic series. To see it make its first appearance here is pretty awesome in retrospect. This is, you know, it's a fun level. It's a different type of, you know, pace. Not a pace breaker by any means, but I like the variety here, you know, where you're above the clouds. I really like how this one directly transitions into the next zone, the Wing Fortress Zone, and it's a really funny juxtaposition compared to the Metropolis Zone, which is blindingly difficult. So to have a calmer level as a follow-up is much appreciated. it's also only one zone, so if you're not crazy about this change of pace, it quickly ends. And disappointingly, there's no boss. I would have liked to see an airborne boss of some kind, but we don't get it. And I guess that they just really wanted to treat this one as a transitional level and introduce a new mechanic, but not torture you like they did in the previous zone. Winged Fortress Zone. So I love the lead-in. I love in the beginning where the plane, gets struck down and Tails kind of, just goes off screen. And, this level has a lot of pitfalls, a lot of bottomless pits. You're high above the clouds just as you were in the level preceding it. And it's really a nail biter of a level. There is a lot of pits. There's a lot of possible ways that you can fall down and meet your ultimate demise. The one thing that I really hated a lot about this particular zone is this thing here, this launch pad that, if you hit anything at all, if you touch anything on your controller, you're gonna bite it. You're gonna lose a life. And to not know how that works that's a bit frustrating. Now I know it's kind of like, you kind of do trial and error, but you're gonna think that you're gonna have to hit right on your controller, but if you do that, you're gonna end up dying. So, this is kind of one of those moments in games where it's kind of like you kind of have to know what to do. You kind of have to experiment to see what works. But I could definitely see someone playing this game for the first time and getting frustrated by that part. This is also another single act zone. Also, during my most recent playthrough, I found jumping on these gun turrets to be quite the nightmare. I couldn't really get the timing down, and I lost more lives than I usually would. I guess this is part of being out of practice, not playing the whole game through for a few years, but man oh man, I had quite a problem with this part. Also, it's funny to note that when my friends and I used to play this game as kids, we used to draw comparisons to the Clucker and Scratch from Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog. Because it was a chicken enemy. Now the Clucker is that chicken that's inside the gun turrets during the level, and Scratch, he does appear in Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine, but he's not in any of the mainline series of games. So we always thought it was funny to kind of make that comparison, kind of pretend that it was him, even though it wasn't. I also like the concept behind the boss fight where Dr. Robotnik has you trapped between these two laser barriers and a big laser cannon is shooting lasers down on top of you. And then Dr. Robotnik unleashes these spiked weapons that come after you, and you have to jump on top of them to jump up into that laser cannon and eventually destroy it. It's actually pretty tricky, it's challenging, and I like the concept how Dr. Robotnik is not directly attacking you, but actually using one of his machines from a bit of a distance. I thought this was very creative and very different from the rest of the boss fights in the game. Then you get this great cutscene at the end where Sonic jumps onto Dr. Robotnik's shuttle as it's going up to the Death Egg, and you're clinging to it as it lands, and I really like this. It's a nice little cutscene, the early day of cutscenes, but it looks real cool and it's very well put together, and it's another great transition. Also, just looking at that great pixel art of Sonic being lifted above the planet just looks so beautiful to me. I just like to sit back and watch it as he's taken off the planet onto the Death Egg. I think this just is a really good looking scene. Death Egg Zone. Now, the interesting thing about the Death Egg Zone is that you never really get to see what the actual Death Egg space station looks like. We all know that it's supposed to be a Death Star inspired space station. It's supposed to look like the one in Star Wars. Heavy inspiration there, but we never get a clear view of it really, and that's kind of disappointing. We don't really ever get to see an outward look of it. We see kind of the space shuttle going into the space station as Sonic is hanging on to it for dear life, but we never get a full glimpse of it. I don't know why the why Sonic Team never chose to animate it. We don't really get to see it at all until Sonic 3, and I find that to be very curious. Okay, well, to be accurate, you do get to see the exterior, but only on the level select screen. But let's talk about the meat of this zone. So again, it's a single act zone, which is, 3 zones running already. So that's interesting how they decided to deviate and kind of break things up, but they're nicely transitioned. So you can kind of see how they're, kind of part of the same beast. They all flow nicely with some really great transitions implemented throughout. We start off by facing off against this particular Sonic robot, and this is not Metal Sonic from Sonic CD. It's either Silver Sonic or Mecha Sonic. You could take your pick, and this has been very confusing for a lot of fans because Metal Sonic was actually called Mecha Sonic in the Archie comics. And Silver Sonic, well, you've got Silver from Sonic 06, but you could kind of call him either one, I suppose. I always called him Silver Sonic, even though I guess it wouldn't really be too accurate, to refer to a robot as like Silver. I guess Mecha kind of fits in a bit better. But I guess it's open to interpretation. It's kind of weird that they didn't decide to give him an actual official name. He's a very easy boss. Basically you just have to kind of time your jumps and kind of hit him on the forehead and avoid his spines. But this is a pretty cool battle. I like the idea of facing off against a metallic doppelganger. And I always got a kick out of seeing Dr. Robotnik's face in the middle of the screen as he's kind of looking at you. It's weird how you could actually just see the screen. He's just got this smile on his face through the whole thing. It's not like he's really spying on Sonic, but just like kind of mocking him openly. I like that little touch that they put in there for a boss fight of this magnitude. And then you've got the Death Egg Robot, which this boss is just a pain in the bootay. It's very difficult to know when you could kind of hit him because sometimes he kind of squats down. He has a lot of knee-jerk reactions. It's a very herky-jerky boss fight. Many people have complained about it throughout the years. But I think it's very imposing, and it's very fitting that it be this difficult for a final boss. So I really can't complain all that much because there's a lot of bosses that are very simple and easy to beat in Sonic 2. So the fact that they wanted to go the extra mile to give you a tough time for the final boss is perfectly understandable, in my opinion. So there you go, guys. There's my little retrospective on Sonic 2. Hope you guys all enjoyed it. And let me know what some of your favorite Sonic 2 memories are. Some like bizarre memories and things, that kind of bothered you about the game or gave you a tough time. I'd be interested to know. And please subscribe if you haven't already. Click the bell so you get all notifications when I post all my new videos. And guys, thank you all for watching. I'll see you next time.